Hello.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. We are now entering our public comment portion of the meeting. And at the beginning of this meeting, I would like to have a special recognition. Each month, one board member gets to hand out a special recognition. And this month, Michelle Olympiadis would like to recognize a group that is doing amazing things in the community. So I'll throw it over to Michelle.
Thanks, Jason. I'm really excited to take the opportunity this evening to recognize an organization in the Grady Cluster, which started just this past December by an active parent, Linda Brenner, and other community members who joined in, and very supported by our principal of Grady High School, Dr. Betsy Bachman. And they've started this organization called Grady Cares that services not only, it started out really trying to focus on supporting the high school students at Grady High School who needed additional supports, but has really grown into a grassroots effort to help all families throughout the Grady Cluster who are in need of whatever that may be it food, clothing, furniture supplies, additional school supplies, technology, whatever the need may be, from diapers to adult clothing, right? And so I really wanted to take the opportunity, especially during this time of COVID, and we all are under a tremendous amount of stress. Given the pandemic, many families have experienced additional financial stress that this organization has really been able to galvanize a lot of local support to support the families who need us the most. And I believe Dr. Bachman's with us this evening, as well as Megan McCloskey, who is also a Grady Cluster parent, as well as a teacher over at Springdale Park Elementary. They, of course, along with many others, have been instrumental in getting this organization moving, and they've put together a nice video for us to see the great work that they are doing. And like I said, I cannot say enough great things about a simple organization that got started less than a year ago and the tremendous amount of impact that they are having on the community. I would like to allow, if it's okay, Dr. Bachman or Megan the opportunity to speak if they care to before we watch the video.
Megan, go ahead if you'd like to.
Thank you, Dr. Bachman, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for recognize the collective efforts of the entire Grady Cares community. It has not just been one person, it's been a lot of people, but what's been really wonderful is how the students have been participating. We also have, well, my daughter, Marissa, and then Jafet Higuera Renteria. They have been instrumental in helping us, especially the past few months, in delivering food to families. And to have so many children participate in a community service effort is just wonderful. So thank you.
We also started a thrift store in a local church, donated a room for us, and parents and community members completely renovated the room from painting to the flooring to lighting, and so that we have clothing for students that need it. Grady has a sizable number of students that are in shelters, or in homeless, and in hotels, Rent by the Week hotel. And so we have a thrift store called Zone 6, and the Grady students developed the logo, they developed the marketing, and they really developed the store and helped with that. So it's a wonderful thing that all donated labor and materials, and it's full of shoes and clothes and all kinds of things for students and families that need that.
Great, thank you so much. And I think you even had a student build some shelving for you, if I recall.
Oh, yes.
Something on Facebook about that. So just a really wonderful opportunity for student engagement, for community engagement, and to make us all feel as one in the Grady Cluster. So I really appreciate it. So Pierre, if you don't mind, Linda's not with us, is she? I'd asked Pierre to double check to see if Linda.
She's a voting, she's a poll worker. She's preparing.
Right. Of course she is.
Voting tomorrow.
I should have known better, right? So great, then I'll turn it over to Pierre so that we can watch this great video that y'all put together. And then of course, everyone who is tuning in will be able to see the wonderful work that has transpired over the past, like I said, 11 months.
Hi, my name is Marissa Rainey, and I'm a 7th grader at David T. Howard Middle School. I'm also a member of Grady Cares. Grady Cares was created almost a year ago to help students in the Grady cluster who are dealing with homelessness and poverty. In a short amount of time, we have had a big impact on the community. Grady Cares has provided clothing and household items to families in need. Over the summer, we gave books and STEM activities to children while helping parents register for school. We also set up several little free libraries. We distributed more than $10,000 of school supplies to students. For the past several months, we have delivered food twice a month to families experiencing food insecurity. Grady Cares has a devoted group of volunteers who coordinate these activities, but we rely on the kindness and generosity of the Grady community. The community overwhelmingly responds to every request for donation, whether it is diapers and a high chair for a young mother or a trunkload of food. Grady families ensure needs are met. We also have had many members who have donated their time, from providing Spanish translation of registration documents to building a shelf for our food pantry. Our members consistently demonstrate that the Grady Cluster cares about all its students and families. Accepting this honor tonight with me is Grady Cares founder Linda Brenner, Grady High School principal Dr. Betsy Bachman, Springdale Park Elementary teacher Megan McCloskey, and Grady High School senior Jafet Higuera Renteria. We would like to thank the Board of Education for recognizing our efforts.
Thank you. Thank you again to Grady Cares, and thank you, Jason, for allowing us as board members to recognize folks in our community that are doing great work to support our communities.
So I think we should take a picture. I think Pierre, who's going to take the screenshot? Someone's going to take the screenshot, Pierre? So we can all smile at the same time. All right, let's do.
Hold it up again, Pierre.
Hold it up again. 3, 2, Pierre multitask. 1, everyone smile, smile. All right.
Thank you all very
Presentation,
much.
presentations in the age of Zoom. Thank you so much, Dr. Bachman.
Thank you. I appreciate
you.
it.
Ms. McCloskey,
Good
thank
work,
you so much.
Megan.
Thank you, Dr. Bachman.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How if somebody wanted to donate to Grady Cares following this, what would they do?
We have a Facebook page, but also if somebody would contact me, I'm just B. Bachman at Atlanta. I'll be happy to direct that person to the Facebook page. Thank you.
And can we also post the video with the Operation Feed video from last month on the website so that people can see it and get involved?
All right,
Yes, we can do that.
great. Thank y'all. With that, let's move forward with public comment. Mr. Gaither, could you please go over the guidelines for the public comment period?
Good evening and welcome to the public comment portion of tonight's agenda. In just a few moments, the board will begin hearing from those who signed up to speak by 5:50 p.m. The board welcomes your comments, but before we get started, please take note of the following guidelines on how public comment is conducted. The board is allocated 1 hour for public comment, and each speaker will only be allowed to speak once for a total of 2 minutes. The board may elect to hear your community comments in any order or sequence and is not limited by the order of the sign-up sheets. All speakers presenting highly detailed information are asked to put their comments in writing, and comment cards are available for those wishing to do so. In order to maintain meeting decorum, follow appropriate protocols, protect the confidentiality of students, and ensure impartiality, the board will not hear comments on matters involving individual students, parents, or the character, professional competency, or the physical or mental health of any individual. Also, the board will not hear public comment on personnel matters that specifically include the names or titles of employees. This includes, but is not limited to, contract non-renewals, position abolishment, the hiring or firing of staff, and investigative proceedings regarding allegations of misconduct. Comments regarding personnel issues should be sent in writing to Atlanta Board of Education, 130 Trinity Avenue, Southwest, Atlanta, Georgia, 30303, or via email at boardcomments@atlantapublicschools.edu. www.grady.us. With that said, I'd like to call the first speaker to the podium. Our first speaker will be Lindsay Curtis for 2 minutes.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome. So my name is Lindsay Curtis. I'm a senior at Grady High School, and I'm here to oppose changing the school name to EDB Wells, at least for the moment. To clarify, I'm not advocating to keep the name Grady. I certainly think that a name change is necessary, but I take issue with not only the name Wells, but the process associated with deciding it. First, I think that EDB Wells is not an ideal name for a couple reasons. While Wells's character and political stances were certainly admirable, she has virtually no links to the community of our school. She was certainly briefly in the South, but I'm confident that there are many people who have stronger ties to the city of Atlanta. Her activism and journalistic integrity were impressive, but the school would do well to honor its own history or community. All this being said, though, I would understand completely if I was simply outvoted on the matter. If the data represented the fact that the student body was strongly in favor of EDB Wells, then the critiques to her as a candidate wouldn't be as relevant. However, I think that the data from the survey overwhelmingly reflects that she's not really the choice that the community as a whole is comfortable putting forward. I think that it's important to remember that the board is a democratically elected group with the responsibility of accurately speaking for, not over, the people that they represent. And the survey reflected one result, and the board ended up favoring another. I think that regardless of the reason that this happened, a referendum would be best, the results of which should be used to decide the name of the school. And I would remind board members that they're here to represent us, not make decisions in our place. Ultimately, there were concerns about the relevancy and relatability of EDB Wells as a namesake for the school, and these concerns were reflected in the results of input from the community. But instead of acknowledging the community desires and making decisions based off of them, the board ended up choosing a name independent of what the majority of students wanted. To remedy this, we must vote no on Wells, at least for now, and then put an official vote or referendum out, letting the members of the Grady community decide what they want their school to be called. And if Wells ends up being the choice, then that's awesome, but I think that we should urge democracy within this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker for 2 minutes will be Jay Hammond.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hi, my name is Jay Hammond, and I'm a recent graduate of Grady High School class of 2020. And I'm also a member of the renaming committee for Grady High School. This renaming committee was made up of 7 members appointed by the Board of Education. We were tasked with first deciding whether the name Grady should have been changed, and if so, deciding what name we should recommend. After deciding that the name should have been changed, we underwent months of deliberation, research, and discussion, arriving at the name EDB Wells. We considered and balanced survey responses, historical research, and each committee member's perspective in order to arrive at the recommendation that we did. Ultimately, the committee decided on EDB Wells for reasons including, but not limited to, EDB Wells' explicit stance and actions against racial inequality and violence, her dedication to promoting the inclusion and representation of all human beings, as well as her link to the Grady community through her direct response to Henry Grady's news reports meant to provoke racial tension and instigate racial violence. The entire renaming process was made public. I advertised meetings on my social media. Meetings were also advertised on the Board of Education social media accounts, and the schedule was established and made public from the beginning of the entire effort. The opposition that we all see now has come after the recommendation, which alludes to this argument being against the outcome and not the process. Had the argument been against the process, I would have hoped to have seen this uproar before the decision came to be. We were appointed to evaluate the merits of each name possibility. I do not believe the board assembled us to facilitate a popularity contest. All of the resources the committee used, from community surveys to research to written letters to public comments, were meant to aid the committee in its recommendation. And this committee's charter never cited them to be governing or deciding factors in the outcome of this process. The committee has courageously proposed the name EDB Wells, a name that may not have the most popularity points, but one that takes a strong, explicit stance against the ideals of racism and inequality, and one that I believe represents entirely and exclusively the values that the Grady community has held and continues to hold. I now implore the Board of Education to be a leader, to accept the committee's recommendation of EDB Wells, and to take a stand for inclusion, equity, and courage. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Angela Braden for 2 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm a mother of two in the Atlanta Public School System, and I am here to urge our leadership to please reopen face-to-face school for our children so they can return to a normal, healthy childhood. The science does not support the need for reducing class size, social distancing in classrooms or at recess, or the wearing of masks or other PPE. So I would really urge our leadership to look at the real science, the scientific consensus from many other countries and other districts, even in the United States, that have reopened successfully with just zero adverse results from that, and to open normally in a normal way so that children are not compromised by wearing masks all day and social distancing, which is debilitating to their social development. I'm going to read as long as I can. I know it's just 2 minutes, but from a paper written by a Canadian microbiologist and immunologist, PhD, who writes, there are thousands of scientists from around the world, including Nobel Prize winners, doctors, virologists, immunologists, epidemiologists, and molecular biologists who have spoken out against the lockdown and any form of social distancing, with even many epidemiologists stating that these measures should have never taken place for COVID-19. We do have very specific quote experts in leadership positions, and I would urge our leadership to look at their financial and commercial ties to industry and their conflicts of interest in the advice that you're getting, and to look at independent sources and a scientific consensus outside of the very narrow recommendations from the Centers for Disease Control.
All right, thank you, Ms. Braden. We've reached the time boundary.
Thank you.
Forrest Dines will be our next speaker for 2 minutes.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hello, my name is Forrest Dines, and I'm a senior this year. I would like to express my support for the name Ida B. Wells. She was an abolitionist, feminist, and journalist. I don't think this is a name that will ever become controversial in the future. After having a school named after a blatant white supremacist, I think it would speak volumes to have a Black woman for our students to be able to look up to. Although Ida B. Wells did not receive the most votes in the survey, I believe the reasons behind choosing it are much more compelling than the reasons for choosing a location-based name. I say vote yes for Grady High School Renaming Committee's recommendation. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Jack White for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, sir. I'm actually calling to express my deep distress at the way the entire process was handled. And I want to point out something here. This, in my view, is not so much a matter of who prefers whom. I personally prefer Ms. Wells. What a great choice for all the reasons the last speaker enunciated, but there's a larger issue at work here, and that is the process. A flawed process is by its very nature incapable of producing a result that can be accepted by a large swath of people. And this, I do not understand why we had a referendum if a specific purpose and goal of that referendum was not enunciated beforehand. One such purpose could have been, for example, to eliminate the bottom 2 or 3 choices and set up a subsequent referendum. That's a tactic often held. Another was that I'm distressed to hear of some of the pressure and some of the arguments being argued against folks who didn't vote for Ms. Wells. I prefer her too. I think she's would be a great representative here. But it isn't. There were no bad choices on that board, and no one should be on that list, and no one should be ashamed or regretful for making their own choice. And I also want to point out the very difficult position that the committee and the school was put in. If the committee had tried to design a more difficult set of circumstances to reach this decision, the social circumstances, it could not have done so. During a pandemic, with students with no model of how to approach this very difficult and complicated solution, with no guidance, no previous faculty members or historians in position to try to help educate them. This is very, very difficult. And I hate that they're put in this position and pitted against each other. So in my world, I would say put aside the entire process and start over in a year. But I don't think that's practical, or this board wants to hear it. So if we're going to have a revote, I hope you will have a revote of the students. They have the most immediate interests, and I trust them the most. And I would narrow the choice down to the top two choices and let the students vote again and
Great.
decide that you'll accept it. So good luck to you all. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Our next speaker for 2 minutes will be David Hayes.
Yes, hi, this is David Hayes. I'm a parent of an APS student. I'm here to urge the board to get their plan together for introducing face-to-face learning as soon as possible. Questions that come to mind are, where's the thoughtful and proactive leadership? Where's the transparency of what the current situation is doing to our children who are left at home? Where's the innovative, effective plan to get the kids back to school? Where are the kids without the resources to get extra support during the day? Where are the voices of the teachers who, despite their diligence, hard work, patience, want nothing more than to get in the classroom with their kids? We all want the same thing. Atlanta Public Schools obviously want the autonomy to manage the public health crisis as they see fit. And parents want autonomy to decide if their kids need to go back to school or stay at home. We don't want anybody to be forced into something that isn't right for their child, whether that's the classroom or home. We believe by working together and learning from other districts, we can create an option to return that is safe for all. All children in every part of our community deserve the chance to get the education that is a right to them. No one, not the superintendent, not the members of the board, no one knows what's right for my children, for other children. No one knows what's right for teachers who want to go back. Give us the chance.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hayes. Our next speaker will be Amy Lambert for 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Amy Lambert and I'm the parent of 3 APS students. I am also here to argue for an option for parents to return to allow their students to return to face-to-face school. We are asking Dr. Herring and the board to show us for reopening as soon as possible and at a minimum in January. We have seen countries throughout the country and around the Atlanta metro area successfully return to the classroom and put into place a solid plan to do so. We are simply asking as parents for the same consideration. There are plenty of plans out there that we can emulate, and we should be taking the best practices and putting those into play. We are also asking Dr. Herring and the board to prioritize education and back off on the adherence to this singular metric, which is fraught with data manipulation and issues. The virus isn't going anywhere, and we have to learn to live with it. And we need to decide that education is a priority in our community and for the Atlanta Public Schools. We are also asking the board to stop emphasizing case counting and telling and recommending that folks do implement measures to stop the spread while allowing indoor athletics with fans in attendance. If sports can happen in person, then academic instruction should absolutely happen in person. Yes, kids need athletic scholarships, but kids also need academic scholarships and tools to succeed in life. Again, as I heard the board earlier say, where you were asking for autonomy to handle the public crisis as APS sees fit, parents are asking for the autonomy to make decisions on behalf of their family and their kids as to whether or not they need to be in the classroom or stay at home. Teachers deserve that consideration as well. All children deserve the right to have an education that is suited for them. And we are simply asking the Board of APS to leave that consideration at the closest to the classroom level as possible.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Lambert.
you.
We've reached the time boundary. Thank you. Our next speaker will be Nicholas Kamel for 2 minutes. Nicholas, can you hear us? Yes, we can. Go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Nicholas Kamel. I'm a senior at Grady. I'm here to urge a no vote on renaming our school to Ida B. Wells. It is not about Wells as a candidate. It is about having our community decide for itself what we want to be known as. The problem with quickly choosing Wells is that it's reactionary. Wells will inevitably be defined as a remedy to the harm of Grady, which is counterproductive. With that, those opposed to Wells have sadly been denounced as ignorant of or resistant to change. We all just want what's best for our school. I ask the board, why release a survey if there was no intention to listen to its results? If it was the intention of the board to have an activist be the namesake of our school, we as a school and as a community are mature enough to find one that fits us. The committee just had to ask. The sad truth is that a handful of upper middle class white parents have a disgraceful amount of influence with the board and saw to it that the whims and opinions of their children were brought to fruition. Though my parents do not know you, you are still representing me. Finally, it is deeply troubling when I see the chair of a committee tasked with something more than important squabble with adults in the community over Facebook, over a message that, to paraphrase, just told the community to get over it as she saw that she knew better than the majority. I'd like to remind the chair of that committee that she is an elected official, and by that logic, she may not be in the position she is today. Democracy is imperative. As our representatives, it is your duty to represent the people who elected you. I urge a no vote, that we go back to the drawing board and, if necessary, find activists that fit our community and conclude with a binding referendum on how to rename our school. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Norman Ritchie for 2 minutes. Mr. Ritchie, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, you have 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. My name is Norman Ritchie, and I'm a Grady High School parent. I urge you to vote for Ida B. Wells as the new name for Grady High School, as recommended by the renaming committee. The renaming committee had representation from students, faculty, alumni, city council, and the community. I watched all of the committee meetings and believe they conducted a thorough and thoughtful process that sought to collect feedback from all of those stakeholder groups. After a series of meetings, separate discussion forums, classroom discussions, and other feedback opportunities, the committee voted to remove the name of Henry W. Grady and narrowed a long list, I think it was about 50 suggestions, down to 5. There was no community vote for the removal of Henry W. Grady, just as there was no community vote for which 5 choices of answers. This was the committee doing the work that they were charged to do. There likely will never be consensus on just one name, and the recent survey, I don't believe, was ever promoted as a vote. Similarly, the 2 or maybe even more petitions that are circulating around now are also not a vote. It's just another way for folks to offer input. It is inconceivable that the board would even consider rejecting months of the renaming committee's work that did have significant community participation. Place names are being touted by many as a safe and non-controversial choice. But that premise has been debated both during the renaming committee meetings and the discussions that have followed. For example, I believe there are students who don't live in Midtown that have expressed that they would feel left out by that name. Why not instead name the school for a person whose legacy is indisputably aligned with pushing for equity? Ida B. Wells was a brave journalist who spoke out against lynching, is credited with helping start the NAACP, and advocated for women to have the right to vote. Her legacy stands in stark contrast to that of Henry W. Grady, a known white supremacist. I hope that you will stand strong, as Ida B. Wells did, and let our high school students have the honor of a school that bears her name.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. We've reached the time boundary. Thank you. Our next speaker for 2 minutes will be Valerie Williams. Ms. Williams, can you hear us? Valerie Williams, can you hear us? You have to unmute. If you're on your phone, please dial *9.
Can you hear me?
Awesome, there we go.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Sorry about that.
no problem.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Herring. My name is Valerie Williams, and I am the president of the Atlanta Alumni Association of Booker T. Washington High School. APS's mission state that through a caring culture of trust, equity, and collaboration, every student will graduate college ready for college career and life. This limited edition brochure is the byproduct of intentional collaboration between the Washington Cluster leaders and the Atlanta Alumni Association of the Booker T. Washington High School, parents, and communities. In 2018, we saw a divide within our cluster that was not affording all children in each school a seamless transition of equity. Parents, community members, and stakeholders wanted to know what STEM and STEAM looked like in the Washington cluster. This brochure provides a snapshot of the work being done within the Washington cluster. The cluster principals, myself, and parents began being intentional about the success of the Washington cluster by changing the narrative of how we wanted our story told. I suggested that we distribute the proceeds from the Bethune Elementary parking lot revenues to all schools in the cluster, which would provide much needed funds for each school. That plan currently provides funding for branding the school, resources for students, parents, and staff. Our branding strategy began with our canned welcome script when you call each school cluster schools. The legacy walk, which was delayed by the pandemic, this brochure with much more to come. We are intentional about attracting new parents and students while we retain the ones that are currently enrolled. Always about the children of the Washington cluster, we did not let COVID stop our collaboration. When a student asks why should they attend Washington cluster, this is our why. When a parent asks, why should their children attend the Washington cluster? This is our why. When a partner asks, why should they invest in the Washington cluster? This is our why. When an educator asks, why should they teach in the Washington cluster? This is our why. By 2024, we will celebrate our 100 year of educating with excellence and educating legends. Everyone will want to be a fan of the Washington cluster.
All right, thank you, Ms. Williams.
Thank you.
Our next speaker for 2 minutes will be John Hammond.
Greetings. I am certainly a fan of Washington Cluster after that. I did want to say I'm here to speak in favor of the naming committee. I am a parent, a Grady Cluster parent for 14 years. I have 2 children who attended Grady High School. One is an alumni. I want to stop and say that I've attended every of the renaming committee meetings, and I want to just say to the chair of the renaming committee, Leslie Grant, how much I appreciate the thoughtful leadership you demonstrated during that process. It was a contentious process, to be sure. I found the deliberations to be thoughtful, insightful, and forward-thinking. I was then surprised by the opposition that arose after the proposed name was announced. There was a petition going around with 1,700 names or so many names on it. So I started my own petition 2 days ago. And in 2 days' time, we have 142 signatures who say yes to Ida B. Wells. I was convinced that there would be people who would feel like I do, that the deliberations were informed, transparent, thoughtful, and well-balanced, and who respected and honored the proposal put forth by the naming committee to both change the name of Grady High School and to adopt the name of Ida B. Wells. I encourage the board to stand up and to stand strongly behind the charter that was given to this committee and accept the name Ida B. Wells as the new name for Grady High School. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Hamida Embry for 2 minutes. Ms. Embry?
Thank you, Pierre. Can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Awesome. Good evening, Chairman, members of the board, and Superintendent. I am Hamida Embry here on behalf of AFSCME Georgia. As you may be aware, we represent APS transportation workers, APS food service workers, as well as the contracted out APS Southwest Food Service Excellence employees. It has come to our attention that the APS Nutrition Department is proposing a holiday food distribution program. We support the proposition of ensuring that the needs of our families and students are met. In order to be successful, we believe it to be necessary for the principal parties to plan and work in collaboration and coordination. That being said, it is critically important that the superintendent sets the tone to be sure we have successful community outreach. We are looking forward to working with our superintendent, transportation department, food service department, and Southwest Food Service Excellence, also known as SFE, to ensure this success. We think it's important that our board members participate as well. I will be following up with the board to invite you to join us out in the field. Thank you all for the opportunity to be heard.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Julie Gerard for 2 minutes. Hello, Julie, can you hear us? If you're using a phone, dial *9 to unmute yourself.
Hello?
Awesome, there you are. You have 2 minutes.
Oh, okay. Hi, thank you so much. This is my first Zoom call, so bear with me. I am an alumni of Grady High School, class of '82. All my older brothers and sisters went to Grady as well from the early '70s. My parents went there as well and graduated in the '50s. My aunt and uncle went there. So my entire family went to Grady. Although I know the popular push is for Ida B. Wells, and I've researched her and I have nothing but respect and admiration for such an upstanding, innovative, courageous, intelligent woman. However, I voted for Thomas E. Adger High School. I know that is low on the list of names to be considered. I don't think that all the alumni were reached in an appropriate, broad span way to vote or give their input. I did not feel that I had enough opportunity on Facebook to share enough of what was going on to put my say in, although I had one vote, which was for Thomas E. Adger, because of his care, dedication, respect, and love from everyone that went there and knew him, student body, faculty, everyone. He was the most, he cared about each and every student at that school. He was like a father figure. He was so well respected and feared in a good way. And he led by example and dignity. And he walked those halls every day. He led every pep rally and every football game. And he embodied the spirit and the excellence and the dedication of all his student body. And I feel that we're missing out by not naming it after someone that truly meant something to the school, who was there every day for decades.
All right, thank you. We've reached the time, Audrey. Thank you. Our next speaker for 2 minutes would be Jessica Lavender.
Hello, this is Jessica. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you, Pierre, and good evening, Atlanta Board of Education. My name is Jessica Lavender. I'm a Midtown resident and a parent of 2 girls in the Grady cluster. So I have comments related to the naming committee. As you know, Grady High School is a landmark in the Midtown neighborhood. I think that both Midtown and Grady are welcoming, inclusive, and diverse communities in the center of a thriving urban area. And part of that identity and experience of attending Grady High School is that it's in an urban area in Midtown Atlanta. Also, on a different note, as you know, the Atlanta Board of Education prohibits discrimination based on a person's sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression. And one of the reasons APS prohibits that is not because of what happened in Stonewall, but it's what happened because of the advocacy of residents of Midtown. Midtown is the center of the gay rights movement in the gay community. And the advocacy of the gay community has resulted in the increased acceptance of the LGBT community And also, the students of Atlanta Public Schools have benefited from their advocacy. So I think it's fitting that the Atlanta Board of Education should recognize the contribution of Midtown residents in making the city and school a more inclusive and equitable community by renaming Grady High School Midtown High School. And I think it's fitting that John Lewis, the first stop in his procession was the Rainbow Crosswalk at 10th and Piedmont, because he compared the struggle for equal treatment of the LGBTQ community to his work in the civil rights movement. So I, like many other Grady High School, my daughter and the rest of my family support naming Grady High School Midtown High School. So thank you for your time and consideration.
All right, thank you. Our next speaker for 2 minutes is Edith Dino's. Hello, Edith, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Awesome. Yes, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. The reason that I wanted to talk tonight was encouraging the board to take a better look at some of the data that we have now and figure out some more meaningful metrics based on what we're seeing. I saw in the recent presentation, there was a slide broken down by the pediatric cases. Just doing a quick looking at it quickly, it's not really telling you much unless you're comparing it to the population of the city of Atlanta and the city of Fulton County. It would be really nice if we had the 2020 census data, but I think there are estimates out there that could really tell us, how many children between 0 and 4 are there in the city of Atlanta and in Fulton County. And then using that population number to really get a better understanding of what the case rate really is for the population that we're speaking about, the very young children, and then as well as looking at the numbers from Fulton County and saying, okay, well, now we've got the historical information from Fulton County. They've been in school for 5 weeks. They have 59 elementary schools. We can basically come up with, there's 1 case per week at an elementary school, and start coming up with those metrics and really drilling down into it so that it can make more sense and that it could make everyone feel a little bit better that we're peeling the onion back and not just looking at the onion. And I also, it would be interesting also to add that to another slide, the average age of a teacher in an APS. If you're including people over 70 in these numbers, well, that's not really going to give us a good idea of the teacher demographic. I'm sure it's less than 70. I wouldn't want to be teaching if I was that old, I'm sure. So, just drilling down into it and really starting to better understand what this means so that the story makes more sense. And then,
Right.
Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
No problem. Our next speaker for 2 minutes will be Meredith Bass. Ms. Bass, can you hear us?
Okay, yes, can you hear me now?
We can. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, hi, I'm a parent of a Grady High School 10th grader. I am here to ask the board to vote no on the renaming committee recommendation. I have also attended each of the renaming committee meetings. I signed the vote no petition, which received 1,000 votes in less than 24 hours. It now sits at over 1,900 signatures. I signed as many did because we feel the process was flawed. The students were represented for 2 months by a Grady student and the remainder of the time by a graduate. The students deserve to have their voices heard. The current students are not on the social media platforms that the board uses. I would be interested in knowing how many students actually receive board emails. Very few have Facebook pages, and more importantly, they were not in school when the process started and are not in school now. My child did not have discussions in his 4 classes. Some might have, but a lot of kids did not. I ask you all to vote no, focus on getting the kids back in school, and open the discussions to all students when they are in the buildings. By signing this petition, the community and especially the students need to gain trust in the school board. You represent your community. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Audrey Reese for 2 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you. My name is Audrey Reese. I'm the parent of a David T. Howard student and an Old Fourth Ward resident. Last week, I started a petition asking the board to vote no on renaming Grady High School to Ida B. Wells. The debate was not about Ida B. Wells, who was a wonderful person with an irreproachable legacy. The fact is, her name is not right for the school at this time. In less than 5 days, this petition has gotten almost 2,000 signatures, showing in fact that community disagreement with the name of Ida B. Wells was not new, but clearly the community felt it had not been acknowledged in this decision. People felt that they had been disregarded in the process. In some cases, they were even reluctant to articulate their preferred name out of fear of negative repercussions or even being labeled as racist or a supporter of Henry Grady's problematic views if they did not support the name of Ida B. Wells. This petition was a final flashpoint and chance for the community to lift its voice and be heard. The board should vote no on the recommendation to rename the school to Ida B. Wells. Vote no and pick a name that has broad community support. Vote no and pick a name that is very relevant and connected to this school and to Atlanta. Vote no and pick a name that is not reactionary and does not continue centering Henry Grady in his future. Vote no and pick a name that will allow all the stakeholders a greater opportunity to move forward together rather than ongoing disconnection and division. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Morna Francis for 2 minutes. Oh, Ms. Francis, can you hear us?
I can hear you now. Can you hear
Awesome.
me?
We can. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Morna Francis. I am a parent who lives in Midtown. I have a Grady alumni and a Grady junior. I am on this, and I'm currently also a member of the Equity Task Advisory Board, and I've participated in APS and the cluster in many roles at Spark and Inman, Go Team, PTO president, all that good stuff. So anyway, I call to say that as an African-American woman, I would love if the school closest to me was named Ida B. Wells, but due to the current season of protests, pandemic, and even political unrest, I have been advocating for a place/location name during some of these meetings via the Facebook chat. Of course, being a Midtown resident, I wanted it to be Midtown High School, but in reading some of the chat discussions on Facebook, I saw how that left out all the other neighborhoods that are represented or served by Grady. And so that's not who I am. That's not what I want to be. So that's when I realized that even the name Midtown or Piedmont, because they're also neighborhoods, they come with their own baggage also. So I know that APS has a North Atlanta. I know or think at one point there was a South Atlanta. So in order to ensure that when our children get back to the building, that there is no tension that could be fed into this due to the political unrest and season of protest at this moment. And quite frankly, as adults, we might not have been showing the best example of how to disagree with each other. I think that the best thing would be to name the school Atlanta High School because—
Thank you, Ms. Francis. We reached a time boundary. Thank you. Our next speaker will be Waratasa for 2 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Rahwa. I am a Grady alumna and now a Grady parent. My message today is to those who oppose the name Ida B. Wells. I urge you to think outside of your world. Think of the families who often don't have a voice in matters like this, but benefit greatly. This is what the committee did. I appreciate the thorough approach they took in considering those who aren't as in the know as others, but still deserve representation. Relying solely on survey numbers would silence the already overlooked community members. We all know that listening to those with the loudest and most influential voices will only continue the cycle of exclusion. After adhering to the board's naming committee policy, there is now a new issue with the process only after this name was chosen. Having a school named after a woman who fought for human rights sends the right message to our students and aligns with the spirit of our school. To those who say it would be reactionary to name our school after Ida B. Wells, it should be. This is the time we need to be intentionally anti-racist. I urge the board to vote yes for the name Ida B. Wells. I want to thank Leslie Grant for her thoughtful leadership and efforts to be inclusive. And in regards to the petition that is circulating, there are many, possibly half, who signed that petition not only against the name Ida B. Wells, but against changing the name Grady at all. The person who started this petition may not be aware of that, but that is the case. I'm tired of being asked to compromise. I compromised when I graduated from a school named after a white supremacist. We compromised by having the name for 70 plus years named after a white supremacist. This is time to be intentionally anti-racist, and I urge the board to vote yes for this name. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Janet Kishwa for 2 minutes. Hello, Janet, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, you have 2 minutes.
Great. I actually didn't intend to speak. I signed up just because I thought that was the only way to see the meeting. But I will say, I thought the first speaker, Lindsay and Jack White and Nicholas Kamel, all made great points, and I don't want to repeat them. But I want to really just thank you all as a board for finally, for the first time after years of advocacy for us to get rid of the Grady name, that you all are actually empowering the students to lead the community along and remove the Grady name from the high school so that we no longer have a school named after a white supremacist. But to that end, I think that you need to further empower the students to have a little more say in what they want the name to be. I think that'll build future leaders, allow them to go back and vote quietly, privately, so that no one can find out how they have voted, and let that name stand. I have a preference for a name. I think the name y'all like is great, but it doesn't matter what I think, because I really think that this is the time to empower those students, and y'all have started on the first step. As to whether or not it's odd that it's coming forward now that you all have chosen Ida B. Wells, you know, there may have been a thought among the students who voted that it was going to go with the majority vote, and they didn't think there was an issue until it was Ida B. Wells. I don't know. What I will say is thank you, and please continue to empower the students to make this choice.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, this concludes public comment. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Of course you can't, because I was on mute. I love when that happens. We will now transition to the legislative portion of our meeting. If you've noticed during the public comment, we've been wearing our vote masks. That is because tomorrow is the last day to vote. So we need and would like to remind everyone to vote. I will talk about that again a little bit later in my comments, but it is extremely important that everyone vote. Thank you, community members, for taking the time to speak with us and for your flexibility in speaking to us through our virtual procedures. We always appreciate your feedback, and I thank you for participating in and engaging with us for the betterment of Atlanta's children. We will now move into the legislative portion, and before I ask Dr. Herring to make her remarks, I wanted to share with you a few announcements. The first is that November is National College Application Month. The goal of the month is to provide all Georgians, all high school seniors, with the opportunity to apply to college using GAFutures.org. That's GAFutures.org, with a focus on providing assistance to first generation and underrepresented students as they navigate the college application process. In addition, each high school plans to have week-long activities during the month. Seniors are encouraged to apply to at least 3 schools by November 30th. Students who have applied to at least 3 schools will be entered into a school drawing for gift cards. I think that's amazing. As a first-generation college student myself, I wish my high school had that resource available to me growing up. This month is also School Psychologist Awareness Month, and the National Association of School Psychologists has designated November 9th through the 12th as National School Psychology Week. This year's theme is the power of possibility, which implies hope even amid this time of pandemic. The district employs 28 school psychologists, each committed to using best practices in school-based mental health by collaborating with parents, teachers, and administrators to improve students' social, emotional, and behavior regulation, adaptability, and wellness. They provide a variety of services, including administering psychological evaluations to students in need of special education or gifted services, to providing individual and group counseling to students, and serving on the district crisis teams when students experience significant loss or trauma. Additionally, school psychologists consult and provide parent and educator training regarding learning disabilities, behavior management, discipline, and emotional problems. Especially in these times, we are thankful we have such caring professionals to take care of our students and even teachers and staff when the needs arise. So shout out to our school psychologists. Let's give them a round of applause. November is also means Family Engagement Month and National Parent Involvement Day. That day is on Thursday, November 19th. In Atlanta Public Schools, we truly believe that the parent and family are a child's first teacher. As a result of their dedication and collaboration with schools, parents help students realize their power-filled potential by equipping them with the tools needed to be productive contributors to society. During the week of November 16th, the Office of Family Engagement will host its 2nd annual Parent and Family Engagement Conference with the theme, Together We Are One Family. During the week, APS will host sessions for grandparents and parents of special needs and young children, programs addressing grief and mindfulness, and even a virtual family game night. Please visit the Office of Family Engagement website at the link on your screen for a full schedule of events. Every year, in the middle of American Education Week, which is the week of November 16th through the 20th, the National Education Association honors education support professionals and recognizes the contributions they make to public education. From instructional assistants and paraeducators to security guards, technology specialists, and skilled trades workers, today's support professionals provide invaluable services that enable students to learn in positive and supportive environments. Without them, we simply would not be able to provide a quality public education. And they have been stalwart employees amid this pandemic, often on the front lines, so we cannot thank them enough. So I'd like to give our support professionals a huge round of applause. Also, with the general election coming ahead tomorrow, November 3rd, I want to remind everyone in our community of the district's Good Trouble voter campaign in partnership with When We All Vote. The campaign aimed to educate and inspire students and families about the importance of voting, honors the late Congressman and civil rights leader, John Lewis, who once said, "Never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble." As part of this effort, the district, under the guidance of social studies coordinator, Janine Lewis, made it a priority that every APS student who is eligible to vote is registered in time for the election. I am thrilled to announce that because of this campaign, our team registered 576 new student voters. Additionally, a number of our students have become ambassadors and will be volunteering at precincts across the city to assist with the election effort. We are also encouraging all students and their parents and family members to please, please, please vote by tomorrow. Reach out to your families and your friends and ensure that they have voted. And in fact, the best thing you can do is to reach out to 3 people that you want to make sure vote and encourage them that once they vote, they should also reach out to 3 other folks. Again, congratulations to all those who are involved. And if you haven't voted already, please make sure you vote by tomorrow. And speaking of voting, during the work session this afternoon, Erica Long, our Senior Policy and Government Affairs Advisor, provided a thorough report on our priorities for when state legislators meet again. For our stakeholders who are just tuning into our meeting, I want to provide a quick summary. Our 2021 legislative priorities include: 1, provide adequate, stable education funding, including continued full funding of QBE and updating of school funding formula. 2, protect the Atlanta Public Schools property tax base and to support quality instruction for all students, including by restricting the issuance of tax abatements to projects that would not have been developed otherwise. 3, maximize district autonomy and flexibility over fiscal management issues. 4, prioritize early childhood education to provide aligned quality programs to all students. 5, monitor recommendations of legislative study committees on issues relevant to K-12 education and the interest of school-age children, especially efforts to recruit and retain male teachers of color. 6, urge adoption of approach to education legislation that supports the district's move to autonomy and flexibility. 7, strengthen the teacher pipeline and teacher quality by providing resources for recruitment and retention. 8, prioritize continuity and consistency throughout the K-12 curriculum. 9, secure and monitor state support of students, schools, and families impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. 10, secure continued support of school district autonomy over instructional model design resulting from the pandemic. And 11, strategically support legislation, education-related and broader, designed to address inequities across the city of Atlanta and the state. At this time, I also want to let our community know that we will be discussing the recommendation of the Grady High School renaming later today. Earlier this year, I appointed Board Member Leslie Grant to chair that committee to consider viability of renaming the high school. So we'll be discussing that a little bit later. I wanted to shout out Leslie for the work that she has done during the last several months as it relates to the renaming of Grady High School. While names of schools are important and can certainly set the tone for equity in education, it doesn't take away from the fact that we still have work to do to address inequities in public education and in our own school district. So our work is not simply about a name, it is much more than that. We also plan to consider and must consider the name of Grady Stadium. So at this time, I would like to appoint Board Member Michelle Olympiadis as chair of the school renaming committee, which sits in her district. That committee shall be comprised of individuals, the following individuals: Andre Dickens of the Atlanta City Council at large, Debbie Stapinski, one of our MPU representatives, Jasper Jewell, the Director of Athletics, and Valerie Williams of the Atlanta Council of PTAs to consider other names for that stadium. And keep in mind that those representatives on that committee, pursuant to board policy, are more at-large representatives, primarily because the Grady Stadium is an asset of Atlanta Public Schools as a whole, and not specifically of any one cluster. That concludes my official remarks. So I will now invite Dr. Herring to make her own remarks.
I was on mute. Thank you, Chair Estevez. Thank you, Chair Estevez, and good evening to the board and all of our students, teachers, staff, families, partners, and the rest of the Atlanta Public Schools community. Although this meeting has returned to the virtual space, I assure you that everyone in Atlanta Public Schools continues to work diligently, passionately, and effectively on behalf of our young scholars and our dedicated educators. During our work session this afternoon, we heard 3 presentations. Chair Estevez has already provided a recap of the district's 2021 legislative priorities. Our CFO, Lisa Bracken, provided her monthly financial update along with the current draft of the budget parameters for both resources and expenditures and the budget calendar. Dr. Katika Lovett, Assistant Superintendent for Student Services, provided the latest COVID-19 public health data update. And as her report shows, the trends remain unfavorable and our community remains in substantial spread. As the board knows, the current trends demanded that we continue to operate in the virtual capacity. Therefore, we continue to operate in a full site-based virtual learning instructional model until the end of the semester, making certain that we keep in front of us the health and safety of everyone in the Atlanta Public School system. The district is preparing for a proposed January 2021 reopening, which maintains 3 instructional delivery models as previously shared. Option 1, site-based virtual learning. Option 2, face-to-face options. And option 3, Atlanta Virtual Academy. In preparation for the eventual reopening plan, the phased-in approach includes teacher preparation days and phasing in elementary students first, followed by secondary students over the first several weeks in January 2021. Slide 2. In support of reopening in January 2021, the district is launching the following activities in preparation for our proposed Return Plus Learn plan. Expanded academic wellness and engagement interventions across schools to address the neediest of students. We have spoken intentionally and frequently around the need to support our highest need students. However, it is critically important to note that interventions in Atlanta Public Schools have been in place even in our virtual capacity. Our students have had the full support of all of our student support staff employees, whether that's school counselors, school nurses, school psychologists, school social workers, etc. However, as a part of our efforts for preparing for reopening, we are working strategically to expand and identify even additional supports for our highest needs. And I'll speak to that in just a moment. In-person learning opportunities for students with disabilities who are enrolled in low incidence programs. Again, this is a population of our scholars that we have identified as well from the very beginning. We want to go ahead and have parents and our community stakeholders, but specifically our parents, to be aware that in preparation for a reopening in January of 2021, it is our intent to also launch the opportunity for a second completion of the intent to return form for all students to select or change their previous declaration so that we can have adequate data for January 2021. And of course, a continued monitoring of APS athletics and identifying potential opportunities for APS Arts to perform or practice in person in small, socially distant appropriate groups as deemed appropriate, but we will continue to monitor for those opportunities. More information and details are forthcoming next week regarding these activities and the revised reopen plan. And so I do invite our parents and our stakeholders to stay tuned. And it will be our diligence to make certain that we communicate this well. In addition, we will hold a fireside chat for our special education parents on Thursday, November 12th at 6 p.m. Again, Thursday, November 12th at 6 p.m., a fireside chat for our special education parents, and we will continue to promote that information. Our next slide. As we prepare for a reopening, I must again extend a deep appreciation and acknowledgement to principals who are our school leaders, teachers, support staff, parents, and students. I acknowledge that for all of us, these have been the most unique and challenging of times. I also must acknowledge our amazing support student services staff, which has provided intervention since day one, as I've mentioned, with school counseling, nursing services, psychological services, and social work support. But to properly close out the first semester and prepare for reopening, we will use the next 9 weeks to include more intensive interventions and supports for the students in APS with the highest need. Therefore, it is critically important to identify, serve, and provide resources for all students. Students with the highest areas of need will benefit from additional supports that help transition them through virtual learning and to secure the right supports for transition into school reopening. As everyone in the Atlanta Public Schools community knows too well, the COVID-19 pandemic has created numerous obstacles and challenges to quality teaching and learning, even with our best efforts. And we are grateful that our staff has remained strong and diligent. We recognize that some students have lost invaluable learning time since March of this year, which places them at a greater risk of not being prepared for college, career, and life. And so we continue to stay focused and supportive in this effort. Many have also experienced the loss of loved ones. Others have grappled with racial injustices and police brutality, and others still face food and income insecurity. And all of these realities remain in the forefront of our own radar as we navigate to the close of this year, as well as the close of this semester. It is clear that there is much work to do to meet the academic and social and emotional needs of our students during this pandemic. To that end, we have developed guidelines for each school to provide expanded efforts for intervention for our highest need students. This intervention plan is aligned to and in support of the district's whole child framework and will include virtual interventions and opportunities for face-to-face intervention in a controlled protocol. The interventions will continue to address students' needs in the areas of academic performance, wellness, and social emotional learning. Any interventions that might require face-to-face needs will be offered in alignment with APS's health and safety protocols, developed in close collaboration with public health officials and as recommended by the CDC, in addition to doing so in small and very small numbers. I must stress that the implementation of interventions have been ongoing since the start of the school year. This effort is to intensify and expand interventions and does not replace core instruction. And interventions will be scheduled around the instructional model. Care teams, consisting of student support staff, will help to assess student referrals, assign appointments, and the appropriate interventions as deemed necessary. Our schools will have the ability to determine what interventions are offered, how they are staffed and delivered, and when, whether that's before, during, or after school. Next slide, please. Each of our schools and clusters will develop their own plans to meet the unique needs of their students. And our schools will determine the specific details of their intervention efforts, including whether they are happening before or after school. But they must meet regularly to identify students eligible for these interventions based on, as I've shared, academic needs, wellness needs, and engagement issues, as shown before you in the chart on the screen. It is important to note that district leaders have worked in a collaborative fashion with school-based leadership to create these opportunities and supports to address specific needs for our highest need students. And to be clear, this intensified and strategic focus on interventions will allow for us to plan for the preparation of continued support for students as we close out this first semester virtually, and will also help students become even more prepared and engaged for second semester. Next slide. We recognize that the identification and service of students will provide critical data support in planning for the remainder of this academic year, and as I've mentioned, for the eventual reopening. I also want to assure our students, families, and staff that any of our referrals, once made for any type of intervention, be it virtual, but also face-to-face, will be offered in alignment with APS's health and safety protocols. The guidelines are shown on your screen. We plan to start offering these interventions sometimes this month, so our schools will stay in touch with our families to provide more specific details. And finally, I want to join Chair Estevez in congratulating all of our high school students who registered to vote for the first time, and also to remind everyone who hasn't already to make sure that they vote tomorrow, November 3rd. I also want to remind everyone that students will not be in school for Election Day tomorrow, but it is a teacher professional learning day. So our employees will be on duty and working. And we will be glad to see our students again when they return for virtual learning on Wednesday, November 4th. Mr. Chair, that concludes my remarks for this evening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Herring. I appreciate it. Will you now present the consent agenda?
Thank you, Chair Estevez. Before I submit the consent agenda, I want to direct your attention to items 7.03 and 7.04 regarding COVID-related increases in expenditures for janitorial supplies and for HVAC services. Both items are essential in preparing our classrooms and buildings for the eventual return for our teachers and students to in-person teaching and learning. Chair Estevez and members of the board, I am pleased to submit consent agenda items 5.01 to items 8.01 to the board for approval.
Thank you so much, Dr. Herring. Are board members logged in to board docs?
Give me a minute.
It's okay. If everyone's not logged in, I think we can, I should have said that at the beginning of the meeting, but we can take the voice vote just to make it smoother. Motion to approve the consent agenda has been properly moved by Leslie Grant. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Cynthia Briscoe Brown. Any
I do have if there's any
questions about the consent agenda?
If there's any room for discussion, I would appreciate, I did send this over. We received an email around 1 o'clock this afternoon from, and I'm trying to figure out exactly which item they were referring to, but the headline of the email, give me one moment, I'm pulling it all out. It's a cooperative contract being considered by a state procurement contract solicited by us. And again, it does not state, Dr. Herring, I forwarded it to you later this afternoon around 3 o'clock or so. Just want to get some clarity with the public so that there's no confusion about what is being suggested on this particular item. And give me 1 second. I'm going to try to pull up the headline so that I can see.
I'll pull it up with you.
Thank you. It's from Mr. Michaels.
Cooperative contract being considered is not a state procured contract.
Yeah, the
Source.
actual, yeah, it's contractors
Do-
for construction. Let me see if I can
I was
find
about to say, let's discuss the agenda item number.
Yeah, the construction services. It's not. It doesn't note the agenda
No.
item. So give me.
So 7.05.
Thank you, Jason.
It appears, board member Olympiadis, that this is about the minority pool.
Yes, ma'am.
I gotcha. So now I'm trying to be clear on the question here.
Yeah, I think Michelle, you're going to have to read the question
Sure, and I
or say the question out loud, because the
Yeah.
public needs to be able to understand what you're asking.
So basically, could you explain the process, because it reads from the email that the pool is not as deep as suggested, and wanting to know how exactly minorities are procured from this particular pool. So if you could just give us some clarity as to what the process is.
If I may, that sounds like a deep conversation around procurement process, and perhaps it would have been better to pose on the side or.
The concern is that there's only one of the minority women business entrepreneur firms listed as actually officed in Atlanta. So my first question would be, do we need to, given that we're looking at this initially, do we need to revisit this for this item?
I think if we could potentially, I don't necessarily know if we need to revisit it, but I mean, in the executive summary, it clearly states that there are 22 vendors available for use in this contract. And I think the question the question that's being posed by the person who sent the email is, with respect to our process. And so I believe that we have put measures in place with Fidelity over the past couple of years, especially through audit, where I served with board member Grant over the past 2 years, who has really tried to address this issue. And I just want to make sure for the public that we are confident in our processes and that we are going to be able to provide an adequate response to this particular constituent that is raising concerns with respect to our process and ensuring that we are properly procuring and advertising and soliciting minority businesses to participate in the district's work. Is that fair?
Let me speak to it a little bit for us, board member Olympiadis. The cooperative contract being considered is not a state procured contract. It was solicited by a purchasing cooperative from another state, that's Sourcewell from Minnesota, that was mentioned, I believe, in this communication. And Sourcewell is a nationwide cooperative. So this cooperative contract was adopted by the state of Georgia and made into a statewide contract for the state of Georgia. I think that's the first response and answer to the question. I don't know that it was a question, but it was highlighted. So I want to certainly share that. Let me read a little bit more here. Using this cooperative contract will incur an additional 7.2.5% in fees. That was mentioned. This communication that we have in the email also stated that for the 25 million allocated for use of the contract by APS, that translates to over $1.8 million of taxpayer revenue that could otherwise go towards real or actual projects and benefit students. The current APS current contract for the job order contracting with Brown and Root, for example, is currently at a contracted rate of 15.1% for overhead and profit. And I hope that this helps. Overhead, profit, and general condition fees are written into normal construction contracts. The cooperative contract will allow APS the opportunity to compare the cooperative prices against our current APS contract on a project by project basis. The vendors that are noted on the board agenda in reference to this not being as deep as I think the individual who sent the email voiced as concern. The vendors noted on the board agenda item are a combination of those who were awarded statewide and vendors awarded area A. That's a total of 10 each. The number 22 is an error. It should say 20 and not 22. And then the minority pool is not deep. That was, I believe, one of the other items that was listed on here. MWBEs do not need to be physically located in Atlanta. The APS Office of Supplier Diversity has verified with Fulton County that 5 of the firms listed on hold an MWBE certification. So that helps for a little bit more clarification relative to this one. The bottom line, I think, relative to the minority pool not being as deep as suggested and identifying that it's only one, is that MWBEs do not need to be physically located in Atlanta to hold a certification as an MWBE. The APS Office of Supplier Diversity has verified with Fulton County that 5 of the firms listed are have MWBE certification.
Okay, so just to clarify, because I think there's a lot of dialogue referencing an email, but we haven't really given the public the opportunity to actually understand what the concern was. So I want to take a step back. Dr. Herring, you did answer the questions. The first one was related to a concern that this was an out-of-state cooperative and not a state endorsed or state contract, which the concerned parent or concerned emailer said could mean that APS is not saving the amount of money that we could if it were a state contract. What you answered was that it was adopted by the state, and not only that, but there was additional protection built in that allows us to compare contracts on a project by contract basis. So there's a back end protection there. And then the other concern that was raised was around minority and women owned businesses. And Dr. Herring, you mentioned that the email states only one of those businesses was a minority owned business, but the team verified that 5 out of the 20, so 25%,
yes,
are minority owned and women businesses as certified by Fulton County. I think I summarized that
well
correctly. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Jason.
Michelle, does that address your concerns there?
It does, as long as we can make sure that, like I said, it wasn't my concern. It was so much that someone had brought it to the attention before we were going to vote on it that I thought we needed to address it publicly. And I know that we will send this particular constituent a response outlining what we have just said. So thank you, Dr. Herring, for bearing with me and my colleagues as well while we got that addressed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other questions there? All right, I don't know if everyone, is everyone logged in now?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so let's open the vote.
Vote is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you so much. We now move to (9.01), which is the monthly budget adjustment. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved by Michelle Olympiadis, seconded by Ishay Collins. Any discussion? All right, let's open the vote.
Sorry, give me a minute. I lost my page.
The vote is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. The next item is 9.02, the recommendation for Henry W. Grady High School. Before opening up discussion, I want to make sure I throw it over to Leslie Grant just to provide a little bit of recap. Back in March, the board decided to name three, and I named three renaming committees to look at schools that were named after historical figures who had a path of making white supremacist remarks, and who history has indicated had white supremacist beliefs, and certain individuals who had connections to the Confederacy and Ku Klux Klan, the KKK. And as part of ensuring that APS has buildings that are named after people who represents the values of our constituents, our students, our parents, our families, and our staff, we wanted to make sure as a board that we heard those concerns. And frankly, those concerns had been brought for many years before this, over a decade of alumni, of students, of faculty, of community members voicing their concerns about the names of a couple of our buildings. And this board wanted to step up and take that challenge on. And we knew it was going to be a difficult process. We knew it was not going to be easy. And I am grateful to the committee chairs who took these challenging issues head on. Forest Hills with Ishay Collins, Brown Middle School with Aretta Baldwin, and Grady High School with Leslie Grant. And I stated this during my opening remarks, and I'll state it again. I greatly appreciate the work that Leslie Grant and the committee have put in to get us to where we are. It's not something that took place over days or weeks. The committee was named in March. Meetings, because of the pandemic, were delayed until July. And from July until today, that committee has been working. So greatly appreciative of her leadership and the committee's work, as well as the work of the community in helping to get us to where we are today. So with that, I want to throw it over to the chair of the renaming committee, Leslie Grant.
Thank you, Chair Estevez. So I will, if you'll indulge me, I do have a prepared remarks that I would like to read through if y'all can be patient with it. At the March 2nd, 2020 Atlanta Board of Education meeting, Chair Jason Estevez appointed a special committee to engage stakeholders regarding the potential renaming of Grady High School and to submit a recommendation to the board. The committee consisted of myself as the board member where the school sits, appointed as committee chair, District 2 City Council Representative Amir Faroki, NPUE Representative Courtney Smith, who is also the Midtown Neighborhood President, Grady High School Assistant Principal Carrie McBrien, Grady High School alumna of 96, Celeste Beal, a Grady student and current now an alum, class of 20, Jay Hammond, and Council of Midtown Neighborhood Schools, Parent Representative Janet Kynard. I want to personally thank all of the committee members. They volunteered, I think, a lot more time than they thought they were going to. And I just want to, I'm just very grateful. Everyone on the committee was extremely thoughtful, deliberative, honest, and forthright with their opinions about the input that we all received. So I just, I want to make sure that that is very firmly stated. We had a lot to consider, and I feel everyone did their best to have a very broad consideration. So thank you. Thank you all very much. Although the meetings allow for, all meetings allow for public comment, 2 of them we had specifically dedicated to hearing from stakeholders. We had 7 meetings total. We had an introductory meeting, 2 listening sessions, 2 deliberations, and then a deliberation where we got down to 5, and then a deliberation recommendation meeting. The final meeting was the 20th of October. Stakeholders' input was gathered throughout the process via email, public comment at each of our meetings, a publicly accessible nomination form, including the ability to phone in nominations if people wanted to give us a call and leave their information there, a survey form, and our Let's Talk communication platform. All of the information related to the meetings was kept on a special naming committee page of the Board of Education's webpage. And I would recommend anyone who is still curious about this process, please go to that page and make sure that you watch the videos connected to this process. On August 11th, we had a unanimous consensus among our committee members to recommend a name change of the school from Henry W. Grady, including any portion of the name or hyphenation, to a new name. So that was step 1 in this process. After this decision was made, over 50 names were considered by the committee, and these were from public nominations. Urged the school for the late Congressman John Lewis. Due to the fact that our board policy does not wish to cause confusion with other schools, we have a Douglas Cluster Middle School, our John Lewis Invictus Academy. We wanted to make sure that the public knew that we were soliciting a new name and not John Lewis. Committee members were encouraged to engage with their respective representative groups to determine a formal slate of names from the recommendations we were receiving. All committee members expressed a desire to have a greater voice from students, and additional time was provided during this process for that purpose. Assistant Principal McBrien facilitated a process of engagement at the school that returned feedback from several classes after engagement from several of their professors. Faculty, staff, and school community at Grady High School, as well as cluster feeder schools, were given the opportunity to weigh in on the decision. On October 13th, based on the thousands of inputs, the committee reduced the list of names to 5: Freedom High School, Ida B. Wells High School, Midtown High School, Piedmont High School, and Thomas Adger High School. Additional feedback was requested from the community about the final 5 names. A survey was created to inform the final recommendation. It was explicitly stated on several occasions by myself that this was not a whoever gets the most votes wins situation, but respondents were asked to provide their rationale for their choice and provide context and understanding if they chose regarding their selection. We received over 1,600 unique responses that indicated a plurality of preference for a place-based name, Midtown or Piedmont, with Ida B. Wells coming in consistently second among constituent groups. Of Midtown and Piedmont, Midtown received the bigger selection of that. On October 20th, the committee debated the options, which included a qualitative feedback and quantitative data. that had been collected. Ultimately, the committee, and again, I encourage folks to go watch the videos. Ultimately, the committee voted 4 for Ida B. Wells, 2 for Midtown, and 1 for Piedmont to move forward those final names with a final name recommendation, 4 votes for Ida B. Wells. Sorry, that sounds confusing. The naming committee moved forward Ida B. Wells with 4 votes. Midtown got 2, Piedmont got 1 to this board for approval. I want to take this time to thank the committee for all the hard work that went in. I know there's been a lot of talk about the work, but at times, Jason, you brought this up, it really did seem like an impossible task, but I think we had a very thoughtful process. We engaged meaningfully with this, and I am very pleased with where we ended up and feel like we have done a lot of consideration. Throughout the process, we kept our students as top of mind, and as we heard from various stakeholders, but the students were always extremely important by every constituent group here. Since the recommendation has been made, we heard from many who are pleased with the choice and many who expressed concerns about the process. We've also heard from community members that believe that we did not sufficiently take into account the student voice. And while I do believe the process was a fair one, I believe that what we must do is that we have to ensure that our student voice is ultimately heard and elevated. So I would like to propose to my colleagues right now that we have postponed this agenda item until we can have a confidential vote from the current Grady High School student body that allows for ranked choice voting of the final 3 names submitted by the naming committee. The results will give the board a clear indication of where our most important stakeholders, our students, stand on this issue. So at this time, I would like to make a motion to postpone consideration of this agenda item until December 7th, the December 7th, 2020 board meeting.
Thank you, Leslie. And to be clear, a motion has been made, but that is not, we are still discussing once we still discuss the issue. Just because the motion has been made, that does not mean we're not having a discussion. I just wanted to let everyone know that, to be clear. But a motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
So the motion has been properly made by Leslie Grant, seconded by Erica Mitchell. Now let's discuss. Nancy.
So I just want to better understand. We're going to table it. We're going to table a process that we had. We're going to inject something into the process, which is around the students, which is great. I have some concerns that that's putting a lot of pressure on the students and the school ultimately, and the principal. So I just want to understand how this is going to roll out between now and our December meeting.
So Dr. Herring, do you want to talk about the administration perspective on that, and then we can go from there.
Yep. So thank you, Chair Estevez. Administration is poised and prepared to help support the rollout of a survey for our scholars at Grady to be able to, through their classes and in partnership with the administration at Grady High School, complete then a survey where we can secure student feedback that's feasible by virtue of class distribution, and our administration, the district office, will also assist in ensuring that we don't create a burdensome or laborious task for the staff at Grady High School, but construct, prepare, help to administer, and then also secure results that can be done or executed within the scope of a few days. We just simply would need to identify that time frame. And we've had conversations with administration, Dr. Bachman to be specific, for us to be able to plan for that accordingly.
Should I raise my hand or can I ask a question?
I want to make sure, in a second, I want to make sure that Nancy's question is completely answered.
I understand what will happen in the schoolhouse, but what then is going to happen after that.
After the results are secured, is that your?
So that brings it back to the board. I think that the proposal on the table is to make sure that we have the decision for renaming is ultimately on the board. We have multiple data points at the end of the day. We want to make sure that student voice is heard. A lot of this started because students raised and elevated this to our attention, and they had been doing it over many years, and this board listened to it. And in many ways, ensuring that that student voice is heard is important. So that is another piece of, and a powerful piece of information that this board can use to then name Grady High School, rename Grady High School in a way that is reflective of the community, because we have that feedback from alumni, from parents, from community members, but rename it in a way that empowers students. So once that survey is done, we would then use it to help inform and drive our decision at the board level.
Can I ask you one follow-up question? How does the renaming and pushing this out affect, I know at the last committee meeting, something was brought up about the stadium and one being a name and one being a location. Is there any guardrails around, I mean, are there rules to that, or just?
No, there from a policy perspective, high level, there is no guardrails or no policies against that. The stadium is going to be named by the Grady Stadium Naming Committee, which is a different committee than the Grady High School Renaming Committee. So that's not going to be impacted at all in terms of the timeline. In fact, all of these renamings are happening around the same time. So we're talking about Brown Middle School will likely come up in December, January. Forest Hills will come up likely around the same time. And then Grady High School and then Grady Stadium will also be coming up around the same time. I think there was some question and comment around, well, what if we, some other scenarios. So what if we just named Grady whatever the board thinks it should be renamed. So instead of Ida B. Wells, let's rename it Midtown because of a survey. That's one option. The other option is to vote no on the recommendation and restart. Obviously, that would mean that the work of the committee would have been wasted, and we would start over again, and Grady would remain the same. So those were the three main, and then of course the other option is to just proceed with Ida B. Wells, and the concern there has been stated already. So there is no, clear way forward, which is this idea behind the student vote. Cynthia?
Two questions, just because I thought I understood and now I'm not sure I do. Is the student activity a survey to gauge opinion, or is it a vote? And we will then have whatever name wins the student vote presented to us as the recommendation. And Leslie, I think that goes to you. Okay, Jason.
Yeah,
Whichever one.
yeah.
No,
Yeah, no,
Leslie, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I appreciate the distinction. I mean, terms are important and words are important. We surveyed the community before. Surveys are meant to give us, inform our decision-making. What we are proposing now is that we take all of the work that we have done, lift those top 3 from the community or from the committee, lift those top 3 and give it to the students for a vote. Not a survey. We're not doing a, opinion piece on it. It would be a vote. And like Dr. Herring, I appreciate you. This is going to require administrative lift, because there should be a further education process for the students, so that they are well versed in what these 3, what the 3 names are about, and they are allowed to give their vote confidentially, so that they can through, I'm not sure how you're doing it, Infinite Campus or whatever, but it is a vote, and that vote would come back to us as a board. But it ultimately always is the board's duty and responsibility to say, yes, we accept that. But we are here, we have not ignored in any of this process, any of the input we have received. But my recommendation tonight is that we do this with a, putting it in the students' hands. And I assume that this board will ratify their vote. It is a vote.
Okay.
And I just want to add that it's clear that, yes, Leslie said vote, Dr. Herring said survey.
Yep.
I just want to make sure that ultimately the power of the authority to rename lies with the board. We just need to preserve that. But yes, it is a vote, as Leslie described.
And the name that receives the most votes in the student vote will be submitted to us for our vote at the December meeting.
Yes.
Okay. And I have one more question. I love the idea of submitting it to the students. They're the ones who pushed for this to begin with. And I think particularly this month, this is a great learning experience about how choices have consequences and about the importance of voting. Would it be possible to include Howard Middle School students, at least the 8th grade, if not the entire school? The 8th grade will be the first group to be in the school all 4 years. Middle schoolers, as we all know, particularly those of us who've had middle schoolers, don't often get a chance to think critically and give their opinion and be treated like grown-ups. And I think this could be a great learning experience for them as well. And since they are the ones who will be the ones who will be affected by being there all 4 years, I think it would be important for them coming up to participate in this as well.
If I may, Chair Estevez or Board Member Grant, Board Member Briscoe Brown, I certainly hear you in that consideration. In engaging with administration, the first thought is to make the opportunity to vote available to the Grady students. Per your suggestion, to be entertained, certainly I don't want to take the authority away from deciding that in the moment, but I would share that the recommendation was for 9th through 12th grade students at Grady High School to participate in the vote. If there's a desire to entertain that further, we can discuss, but just wanted to share the recommendation as it's related to administrative discussion.
Whose recommendation is that?
So I've had the opportunity to engage with Dr. Bachman as well as Dr. Sims, our Associate Superintendent for high schools as well.
Okay, so it's their recommendation that we limit it to high schoolers?
In our collective conversation.
I think, as I say, I think it's the administration's recommendation.
So I said the administration.
Okay.
So our collective conversation, I agreed. So can we put that on the super? Yeah, let's put it. I
okay. I'm not going to disapprove this plan because we haven't included the middle schoolers. But I do wish that Principal Maxwell could be included at Howard, could be included in that discussion. And if he feels that it's that it would be beneficial for his students to participate in this. Again, I think we so often, that the middle schoolers often feel left out, and this would be a good opportunity to include them.
Well, I just want to add in, there might be considerations. Our goal is to not have this process elongated, the decision to be made by the December meeting. So I will trust the administrations at the school in terms of their ability to engage the students in a learning opportunity and make that happen.
I completely agree with that. I absolutely, Principal Maxwell and Principal Bachman are certainly wonderful principals and completely able to do that.
Candace?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Leslie, and all for your comments on this and your work on the committee. I have one primary question, which is how does this recommendation track with what I thought was the only applicable policy here, which is FDC about naming and renaming APS facilities? Is it that this recommendation, Board Member Grant, is the recommendation that's referenced from that committee in that policy? And if so, is this the committee's recommendation? Is there a vote that needs to be taken? I'm asking this both from kind of a technical standpoint, but also just the spirit of that policy, at least as I read it. I just am curious, or maybe I'm missing the mark altogether, and please let me know if that's the case. I don't know that I follow the tracking here.
Yeah, no, I mean, do you have it pulled up? If you want to read through it and tell me where your confusion is on the, or need for clarity, I guess, on the decision.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, yes, I do have it pulled up. And my understanding is that it essentially says, and not that we need to be as, hyper technical necessarily, although clearly given comments here, precedent is of importance, right? This is certainly not the last time we're doing this. In fact, we're doing it right now, again, with the stadium and other facilities. But my understanding is, that a special committee shall be appointed by the chair, which happened. The members of the committee met the criteria of the policy. And then at the end of that process, the committee would make a recommendation. So maybe it is that this is the recommendation that the committee is making. And that's partly my question, although I don't, query whether that's, what that reference to a recommendation is, but, we can be open to that. I am just genuinely curious as to how this may play out with respect to reading that policy.
So if I can take a moment just to speak to that. Once the committee makes a recommendation to the board, it sort of leaves the purview of the committee and is now treated as any other board action, subject to any kind of motion that a board member may want to make. You can accept it, you can reject it, you can table it forever so it never gets done, or you can postpone it to a definite time. Those are really the four options when you consider the actions available to you as a board. So once it leaves the committee, it is now your responsibility and your authority to do with it what you will.
Yeah, and Nina, I mean, Candace is policy committee chair. I think it would be very appropriate to make sure that we are looking at and honing any and all of our policies and any necessary regulations for more specificity if needed. But
Yeah,
it feels to me that we met the obligations of the policy.
That's how it feels to me, which makes me wonder why we're here. And then, but also, I guess just for clarity, this is the committee's recommendation? To Nina's point?
The committee's recommendation was for Ida B. Wells.
So that, I guess that's the part where I was wondering how that plays out.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the committee's recommendation, and then you have right now the recommendation to postpone that, considering that until you have the additional data point.
Mm-hmm.
Once we have that vote, we can then take action on that agenda item, on that recommendation, and ultimately make the decision that the board wants to make.
But it will never go back to the committee.
No, unless no, because even if we voted no to the committee's recommendation, it would just start the process completely over again. So there would be a new committee. So no,
do you mean
it would not go back to the committee?
We voted no to what recommendation?
Instead of postponing, we actually,
like tonight?
Tonight. Instead of postponing, we actually voted no on the recommendation. Then it wouldn't go back to the committee. It would just start the process over again if the board wanted to.
But starting the process over again, what does that mean?
It would mean that I would have to appoint a committee again.
It would go back to a committee. A new committee.
It'd be this one.
Yeah, to be clear, you would have to reappoint a new committee and start the whole process.
Right. Yeah. It wouldn't be this one.
Understood. But still that policy would be followed. Even if we were to vote no tonight on the original recommendation brought forth from the committee.
We could vote no. I mean, we could vote no tonight and we could come up with a name and declare that. I mean, legally, correct, Nina?
You can vote to approve it. You can vote to reject it. You can make a motion to amend the underlying motion and say, I don't like any 5 of those names. I want to name it Monroe High School because that's the cross street. Those are, once it's before you, it is really the will of the body.
And again, my proposal for you all was to try and make sure that we are, the letter of the committee is satisfied. And I have spoken to every committee member who they're good with this. We are taking the committee's recommendation about the names that, again, we worked months to get to those names. So the committee's recommendation for those names is moving forward. And in order to address a lot of public concern about that, we are asking to take it back to the students for a vote.
It's nice to hear. I mean, I'm glad that you have spoken to other members of the committee. That answered partly the question there, I guess, whether this is the committee's recommendation or not. So hopefully that makes it a little bit more logical how I was thinking. I don't know that I fully still follow that, this process. I guess what I want to understand is our authority and what purview we have here and what our role is, meaning the entire board versus the special committee. Are we voting on the name, to Nina's point? In other words, I don't, the name I don't like, so therefore this is an example, a hypothetical. So therefore I'm voting no tonight, or I'm voting to amend, or what is that on the table and why, and how is that appropriate for this board meeting?
So I think to Nina and Leslie's point, we could vote on, we can literally do any of those things. We can name it after you, Candace, by waiving policy and amending the motion, waiving policy and doing it.
That was where I was
So we
going
can,
with this, for sure.
I thought that's what, I mean, you could have stopped delaying and just came out with it. But no, but we can do all of that. The recommendation though, that has the motion on the floor is postponing that decision pending a vote by the student body at Grady. So essentially it is we're not taking it up this month. We are waiting until next month after we have that student vote. And then we can adjust the motion or keep it at however it is. Whatever that decision is by the board will be the decision. So in terms of what action we would actually be taking, the action would be to postpone, which is what the motion currently is.
Okay, and that helps a lot. It just sounds like the motion is not just to postpone, but to postpone and do a different process.
To postpone and put this to the students for a vote. A different process verbiage bothers me.
That's just not in the policy, so to me it is a different process. But I mean that's clear. That is clarifying, and I know I've taken up
Clear, which is again, there's a lot not in the policy. So if you would draft some regs around all this, it'd be very helpful.
I think for the sake of time, just quickly, the renaming process has been pretty standard across the board. It typically is comprised of 3 or 4 meetings. The first couple are public comment, and the last 2 are deliberations. In between public comment and those deliberations, there's typically a community survey, community input, where community members, the committee solicits names, committee members discuss those names, go back to their respective groups, vet those names out. There's a debate that occurs, and the committee recommends the name to the board. That is typically what has happened. This one was much more complicated. There were, instead of 3 or 4 meetings, there were 7 meetings. Instead of 2 meetings of public comment, there were 3 meetings or multiple meetings. So this was a unique process within itself, Candace. And I want to credit Leslie, because she actually did a lot more than the average naming committee, because she recognized that this was a unique circumstance. So the survey at the beginning and then the survey at the end is something that had not been done, at least recently, that I'm aware in the last 7 years, had been done by a renaming committee. So as far as seeming out of process, I think the Grady renaming was much longer and different than the standard renaming, but that was also kind of expected given how significant of an issue it was.
That makes sense, but it could cut, in another way, which is that a lot of work has already been done that's been thoughtful and taken into consideration the exceptional circumstances here, and seems to, at least to me, have followed the process as outlined, that's applicable here. And so I just, again, wonder the appropriateness of the recommendation. But if obviously it is the recommendation that I'm hearing from the board chair, so that, and you've spoken to other members of your committee, Leslie, so that is, that answers, I think, primarily my series of questions. And now I really will lower my hand and say thank you for answering.
Michelle?
Thank you. A couple of different things. I want to make sure that my colleagues all understand that from the last survey, a place-based name, Midtown, had the plurality of votes, not a majority, but the plurality of votes, followed by Ida B. Wells, followed by Piedmont. And I think that's important to note because the community was asked to engage and they did. And I don't necessarily know if everyone has had the time to really engage in all the details of what Leslie has gone through to get the proper engagement from the community for her committee and provide her recommendation. I want to be sure that if we do move forward with allowing students to vote as opposed to being surveyed, that what are we as a board willing to commit to with that? Number one. Number two, why are we suggesting 3 names and not either all 5 or the top 2? So a little explanation around that. And while I appreciate Dr. Herring walking us through kind of that this would be, held to a student by student vote, would just like to recommend, if this is where we are headed, that the administration also take the time to make sure that students and folks on social media are fully aware of APS's policy around harassment and bullying, because my understanding, having 2 students at Grady High School, is that there has been quite a bit of unfortunate conversations that are not positive discourse, but negative discourse over the past couple of weeks, if not during this entire process. So I want to start there.
So I would like to weigh in first on the number. I think being respectful of the committee's work over the past 6 months or so, taking the top 3 names that they came up with is a respectful decision and a point to move from.
Relative to your other point, Board Member Olympiadis, I will take that and also take the opportunity to push in to see what we can do even now before that level of engagement occurs for a vote. So since you have brought to our attention and put on notice that there has been some level of concern around bullying and harassment, we'll follow up with school administration. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And again, Leslie, the recommendation to pull 3 names forward is because those are the top 3 names, or again?
The committee, that was from the committee.
Because of
Ida B. Wells, those are the only names that got votes from the committee.
So your position is because of the vote of the committee, those are the 3 names you're bringing forward. All right, I appreciate that. And then Nina, could you please explain one last time, just for clarity, because everyone doesn't necessarily get it the first time, that because this has been brought forward to the board and Leslie is making the recommendation that we move forward with a slightly amended process, so to speak, as to what we've done in the past, what our options are, once again, because I think I understand them. I've talked with Jason and Leslie about this, but I do think it's important for the greater community to really understand what the process is, where we have been, how we are trying to move forward, and how this is an incredibly unique and very different experience than what we've had in the past.
Sure thing. Thank you. So when any recommendation comes to this board as a body, this board has several options before it. It can vote to accept the recommendation. It can vote to reject the recommendation. It can move to amend the recommendation and go proceed that way. Or what Board Member Grant has suggested here and has made a motion for is to move to postpone consideration of something to a date certain. So it's not going to hang out there forever. It is definitely coming back, assuming this motion goes forward, on December 7th, 2020. So the board can get one more data point as articulated by Board Member Grant and take that into consideration in its final decision on the naming of what is now Henry Grady High School. Ultimately, that naming decision belongs to this board.
Thank you, Nina. And so Leslie, one final question. When the if we move forward with the student vote, when the student vote comes back to this board in December, what are you suggesting with respect to a recommendation? That we follow the student voice, or that we add that as part of our discussion, as we are discussing right now, as to potentially what the board would consider a final decision?
I think from everything that I've suggested tonight, the intent of the committee was to listen to student voice, and certainly putting it out back to the students is, I think the recommendation is that I don't think I understand your question. Are you asking if there is a potential for this board to not accept the students' vote? Sure, we have the ultimate decision, it's our responsibility. But the reason to put it back out to the students is so that we have a clear, decisive vote on those names. We've never had that in the past, and people are upset about that because they assume that the surveys were that specifically. So now we are saying we want to make sure that we are decisive about that decision, and that we are valuing the students above at the end of this process as the final deciders. If the students decide to throw out all of our, all of the recommendations and put forth Schoolie McSchooliestein, I'm not voting for that as a board member. So we have the ultimate deciding authority, which we should use with discretion to make sure that there is a honorably reflective name for this school.
I appreciate the clarity, and I think that needed to be noted for the record. So I appreciate the clarity with respect to your answer. Thank you.
Was it clarity that needed to be on the record, that she wasn't going to vote for school? I can't even repeat what she said, but
again, I just want to make sure.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I just want to make sure that the public is clear about how we're moving forward, and I'm trying to help assist us in providing a pathway to unity, given a issue that's another layer of divisiveness on top of our face-to-face learning options.
Thank you. Ishay?
Yeah, I think Michelle just pretty much, I'll just listen to all the dialogue. I think Michelle made a great point about the unity piece. I think for me, I just had a question, and I think it was answered in regards to the preference names. The preferred names, sorry about that. Because I looked at the just kind of the comments in regards to in regards to Midtown High School and the non-exclusivity of it. I think about the communities that embraces the entire Grady attendance zone and cluster. And so I think for me, my question and concern was just more so of the committee's ability to put forth their, even though geographically based names for something that was a little bit more inclusive, but it's not my, process. And I just wanted to make that point, but I think it was answered through all the dialogue that we've heard tonight.
Jason, may I ask one other thing? Moving forward with if we are moving forward with the 3 names that were recommended from the committee to allow the students to make a vote, are we looking for that to be ranked?
It's I think Leslie said confidential vote that is ranked choice voting, which means that there's no runoff. Means that students are able. It's optional, but they are able to rank their first, second, and third choice, and the voting system will automatically do a runoff if there's no majority, knock out the lowest receiving vote getter, and then the lowest receiving vote getter voters would then get the their voice heard again by having their second choice be their number one choice. So it's a process that's used in many places around the country and around the world, and it is allegedly or supposedly a best practice for democracy. This is the democratic thing to do.
Well,
Ensure everyone's voice is heard.
Well, I appreciate the clarity around that. I got the confidentiality piece. I missed the rank piece, so I appreciate the clarification.
All right. Any other questions there? Isha, I think, okay, you asked.
Sorry, I'll lower my hand. Apologize.
No, you're good. All right. So the motion on the table is a motion to postpone the consideration of this agenda item until December 7th, after we've had the opportunity to have a confidential vote of the current Grady High School student body that allows ranked choice voting of the 3 final names submitted by the naming committee: Ida B. Wells High School, Midtown High School, and Piedmont High School.
Can I ask one more question, or is it too late? Forever hold my peace.
Speak now.
You can, yeah.
Thank you. So I still don't understand how the motion is to postpone the recommendation if this recommendation is not coming back to the board, because it's going to be a new recommendation with a new name that's the number one vote getter. Am I lost because of like pre-election brain?
No, so, yeah, we all do. So the recommendation at this point, or what we are considering, is not changing.
It was postpone, the language was postpone the consideration of this agenda item.
But isn't this agenda item Ida B. Wells?
The agenda item specifically says, consider the recommendation that Henry W. Grady High School be renamed to Ida B. Wells High School.
Yeah, so we're not postponing, if I'm understanding the motion, we're not postponing that decision until December.
It could be.
Could be, but it also could not be.
Which is why we're postponing the consideration until December when we have more information.
But I thought the recommendation would be whatever the number one vote getter is.
And Board Member Wood Jackson, to your point, I'm seeing where you're going with it, is that the recommendation flows out of a committee, and right now the committee recommendation is Ida B. Wells, but it might be something different December 7th, 2020, depending on how the Grady student body votes. I do think as a belts and suspenders procedural kind of move that the renaming committee may want to consider, if the top vote getter is anything other than Ida B. Wells, briefly reconvening to formally recommend whatever that final student vote is, to make it perfectly clean, no questions, no gray area about it.
And that could be done by phone or quickly.
It can be a virtual meeting. You can do it by teleconference, by Zoom, and that can be the only thing on the agenda for that meeting.
I will commit to that. Again, I did get assurance from all of the committee members that they were in support of this idea.
All right, let's open the vote.
Mr. Chair, we're going to have to do a voice vote.
Okay. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Hold it up so that Sandra can see it.
Sandra, I raised on Zoom as well.
All right.
You got it.
And then any opposed? Nancy opposes.
Oh, I don't know.
Motion passes 8-1.
One.
Next is 9.03, which is related to the renaming committee of Grady Stadium. Just for the community's sake, this item is to waive restrictions regarding the composition of the renaming committee per policy FDC, as it specifically relates to the council member that would be represent the stadium, that represents the stadium. Council member Jennifer Ide of District 6 and Councilman Matt Westmoreland of Post 2 at Large. They are the two city council members representing the Grady Stadium. They are unable to serve on the committee. So Councilman Andre Dickens has agreed to fill the seat that is dedicated to city council. And the naming committee is tasked with engaging the public to consider that, and the rest of the policy will be followed, but the council member is what is being different, what is different and what is being requested to be waived at this point. I hope I explained that correctly, but if there are any questions, please let me know.
Do you need a motion, or can we discuss, or we need a motion to discuss, I would assume?
Yes, a motion to approve would be great, and then we could discuss.
Is so moved.
Second.
Properly moved by Michelle Olympiadis, seconded by Retta Baldwin. Discussion, questions?
Should I raise my hand?
Michelle, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to say that I did reach out to Councilmember Ide initially in this process, who informed me that she was going to be unable to serve, and I asked her immediately to follow up with Councilman Matt Westmoreland, who also indicated that he was unable to serve in this capacity during this time. And so thanks to Jennifer and Matt, we're able to reach out to both council members, Andre Dickens and Michael Bond, who both graciously agreed to serve on this committee, understanding that this is a district-wide facility. And it literally was Councilmember Dickens responding before Bond, and both, like I said, very happy to serve in this capacity. And so I'm very excited to have Councilman Dickens join us. This is a district-wide facility, and however the cards may have fallen, I think it's great that we will have someone from the south side of the district on the committee for the renaming of the stadium. And as you mentioned earlier, Jason, we have some other great committee members. And I want to point out that Debbie from our MPU is also currently serving as the president of the APBA, which is the organization that represents all the MPUs across the city. So I feel as though the committee is incredibly comprehensive and representative of the district as we try to come to a new name to a district facility and not a facility that is specific to my District 3 region. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you to Councilman Andre Dickens for stepping up there. And just a reminder, because this is waiving a restriction of the composition of the Grady Stadium Renaming Committee, it has to, pursuant to policy FDC, be waived by unanimous vote. So if you have any concerns, please let us know. But that is the only way this can move forward. And again, we are only changing the composition as it relates to the council person that would serve on the committee. Any other questions or any other comments, questions going once? Going twice. We can now open the vote.
The vote is closed. The motion passed unanimously.
Thank you. There is no report out from executive session. We can do a report out quickly of board committees. Let's start with budget. Michelle?
Unfortunately, due to the tropical storm last week, our budget committee meeting was canceled for this month. We did receive our presentation this evening from our CFO, Lisa Bracken, and we are moving forward with respect to budgeting for the next fiscal year. And I look forward to us having our next monthly meeting this month, and certainly entertain the community to come forth and listen and provide their feedback as to how we're going to move forward in the next fiscal year, which will be a challenge given our many issues this year with respect to COVID and virtual learning and the opportunities that we need to support our students. So thank you.
Audit, Leslie?
Yep, we did meet, and as normal, I'm going to punt it over for people to go look at the Office of Internal Compliance webpage for reports that have been submitted. We were able to review the ERP and a bus operator pay audit. But I do want to encourage everyone, please take the time. There's a lot of work that happens here that goes unnoticed and is certainly not underappreciated. And just take the time to watch those videos of the meetings if and when you can. It's a lot of appreciation to Connie Brown and her work.
Policy, Candace?
Yes, we have some background noise. We met very briefly on October 15th and discussed one policy and hope to meet soon. Yes, thank you. Talking to my friend.
And I think that was it. So, board development, Cynthia.
Yeah, maybe we'll get Candace back once I've finished and she can finish that up. That was clearly more important than what she was talking about. Oh, there she is. Let's let her go first.
No, that was actually all I was going to say. I don't know if you guys heard. Oh, we met. It was very brief, but that's all I was going to say. So apologize for the background noise.
Okay. We will have a retreat on Wednesday from 10 to 1 to discuss the application for the next 5 years of our operating model. And that will take place virtually, and the administration will be making that presentation. Tonight, we approved a contract for our work with the Council of Great City Schools to continue our student outcomes focused governance work. And we look forward to continuing that in several sessions over the next year and a half or so. But that will be moving forward as we can schedule that.
Thank you. And before closing out, before moving to board conferences and closing out, I wanted to hand it over to Dr. Herring. I think that there was an announcement that we forgot to make. So Dr. Herring.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Estevez. And because we've come right off of the consent agenda, I do want to appreciate the board for approving the consent agenda, this evening, which included 2 significant appointments to the APS leadership team. And I did want to take a moment to acknowledge them both. First, I want to acknowledge and congratulate Ms. Yolanda Brown on her appointment to Chief Academic Officer. Ms. Brown's service to Atlanta students has been extensive, starting as middle school teacher and becoming the district's middle school teacher of the year in 1999. She became a model teacher leader, a principal of C.W. Hill Elementary, and then founding principal of Springdale Park. Most recently, she served as Associate Superintendent of K-8 schools for the Carver, Grady, and Washington clusters. Throughout the interview process, Ms. Brown impressed us with her leadership experience, her deep and long-lasting commitments to APS, as well as her track record of success throughout her career. While Ms. Brown is excited about this opportunity, she is committed to continuing to support her schools until we secure her replacement. She will begin the transition to her new role starting tomorrow on November 3rd. And I also want to congratulate Tahita Baker-Jones on the appointment of Chief Equity and Social Justice Officer. She currently serves as the district's Senior Strategic Advisor as part of her residency for completing her doctoral studies in the Harvard Graduate School of Education's Doctor of Education Leadership program. Ms. Baker-Jones brings an extensive background in equity and urban education. This includes a master's degree in urban education and social justice pedagogy from UCLA, her work as a teacher when she wrote her district's K-12 social studies curriculum to infuse more culturally responsive content, her tenure as a principal of a social justice themed high school, and as an area superintendent overseeing a high school with social justice specialized programming. Her most recent roles include serving as an adjunct professor and teaching fellow at Harvard Graduate School of Education, where she taught a course on diverse learning, developed the university's course on equity in action in school systems, and served on Harvard President Lawrence Bacall's Diversity, Inclusion, and Belongingness Advisory Council. In each of these roles, Ms. Baker-Jones has led with distinction. Her education, equity, and social justice work has been featured in New York Times and on the CBS Early Show, and she also received numerous awards and recognitions in this regard. President Barack Obama recognized her as a White House community leader in education. Ms. Baker-Jones clearly articulated her vision for how she will bring the same commitment to equity and social justice with a focus on excellence, with her to work here as our first Chief Equity and Social Justice Officer for Atlanta Public Schools. As a reminder, at the start of my tenure as superintendent, the Atlanta Board of Education approved the creation of this position to fully support our focus on equity as part of our renewed mission and the district's 5-year strategic plan. As many in our community know far too well, Atlanta stands as the most unequal city in our nation, particularly when it comes to income inequality. That is closely associated with the academic achievement gap, where white students are nearly 4.5 grade levels ahead of their Black peers within Atlanta Public Schools. But it's not just about equity. While we have not only seen these cracks in our academic foundation, we've also, especially recently, heard the cries of social justice. We really need to, and we must have a senior leader and a division strongly focused on the dual challenges of equity and social justice if we are going to see real movement toward a more equitable system of public education in Atlanta. And to that, I truly believe that that person to help us lead the way as the district's first Chief Equity and Social Justice Officer for Atlanta Public Schools is in that person, in Ms. Baker-Jones. So thank you, Chair Estevez, for the opportunity to acknowledge both Ms. Yolanda Brown as our new Chief Academic Officer and Ms. Tahita Baker-Jones as our first Chief Equity and Social Justice Officer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Herring, and congratulations to those two, and welcome to the team. We look forward to continuing to work with them, and those are two very important positions. Chief Academic Officer As we know, that's something that the Council of Great City Schools talked about in their audit of our academics function earlier this year. So it's important to have that leadership in the school system. And then chief equity, that is also something that we've been looking for since the policy committee and since the board passed the equity policy in early 2019. Dr. Baker or Tahita is going to not only provide us with a plan, but be able to execute on it quickly. And that's what we expect and are excited about. So thank you for your work in that. Any report out from board conferences?
Yes, I can report out for a session that I participated in with the Council of Great City Schools. It was the 10-minute presentation for domestic minor sex trafficking through the lens of the pandemic and how it's escalated through the use of the internet and social media during the time that we are in virtual learning mode. So I just gave a quick presentation about that and what the warning signs are, what to look out for, how school districts can enforce policies around virtual learning and the use of internet and social media.
Great, thank you so much. Any other report outs?
Jason, I attended the Georgia School Board Association's delegate assembly where we reviewed the GSBA, the Georgia School Board Association's recommendations on how to, legislatively move forward with the state on things that we find important, and enjoyed doing that with representatives from across the state on moving legislative priorities with respect to how school districts function. And that goes anywhere from kind of the autonomy of how we make decisions with respect to keeping schools open to how funding through QBE should be allocated. And all of that, of course, is public record, and happy to share that with anyone who would like more information. I shared it with the board of where we were looking to tweak particular legislative recommendations from the School Board Association, and we've done that in all 4 categories, and look forward to that being presented to the state as we move forward, so that all our school districts are well represented with respect to our collective voice. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. All right, is there anything else for the good of the order? With that, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Oh man, I think that was Erica Mitchell that moved, and Cynthia Briscoe Brown, who I heard second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone. Good night.
Have a good night, everybody. Good to see you guys.